Our witness, who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then we also have this objection that we use as lawyers called non-responsive when a witness fails to actually answer the question. But nevertheless, let me address the survivors, because that's exactly who they are. They are not victims, they are survivors. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. We are currently the laughing stock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ, as we see kings and queens falling everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country, because it's not about partisanship. And that's why I applaud Thomas Massie, because he's the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. But nevertheless, let me keep going. My Democratic colleagues have been attacked this entire committee hearing.
This hearing is quickly becoming about more than policy disagreements. Representative Crockett is arguing that the Justice Department's credibility itself is on trial, setting up a broader confrontation over accountability, transparency, and public trust.
They have been lied on, and frankly, the American people weren't looking for that. They were looking for answers about the corruption that they see coming from this administration. In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had two main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly, just like a grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Slotkin, just like the case against Tish James was dismissed and the case against Mr. Comey was dismissed. I completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ, because you don't seem to be good at your job. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting these journalists. In fact, we know after Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were arrested, we know that there were homes of journalists that were raided. We know that threatened prosecution against students protesting your actions and forced tech companies to remove apps used to track ISIS activities.
The exchange is now moving into even more politically explosive territory. What began as criticism of Justice Department leadership is shifting toward questions about transparency, investigations, and whether the public is receiving the full picture on issues that continue to generate intense national attention.
But let's circle back to you protecting pedophiles and creeps, because I want to talk about the president and his possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't know what the president might have done with Jeffrey Epstein, but unlike this administration, I believe that facts matter, so let's talk about the facts. Fact number one, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contained more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number two, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Here's another example. This shows notes from FBI investigators that describe Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, this is a good one. Now, I'm not saying that the president is a pedophile, but there is a lot of evidence in these files that suggests that he's very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. What's crazy about all of this is just that this is a big cover-up. And this administration is engaged in it. In fact, this administration is complicit. But there are numerous others, like how the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens, or how the DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections, or how federal agents have Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe and your agency killed the investigation, or how your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. The fact fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history. An attorney general who has prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution.
I find it interesting that she didn't even want to try, Congresswoman Crockett, to ask any questions, because she certainly did not condemn her leader, Hakeem Jeffries, for taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted. And I will be brief to give you your time, Congressman. This is what she didn't want to talk about. Texas, from Cuba, convicted, homicide, arson, weapon offense.
Convicted. So what we talking about? Convict
Texas,
some of these perpetrators that
homicide.
rape these women that are sitting
Time
behind
belongs-
you
time
that
belongs
you
to the
refuse
gentleman
to even
from
acknowledge
Kansas.
they are here.
Texas, convicted of homicide. Cecil Joseph, from Dominican Republic. Texas, convicted for kidnapping, rape. Khalid Khan, from Afghanistan. That's why they want to talk about Epstein and not what's happening in their own states.
This hearing was officially about Department of Justice oversight. But what unfolded inside the House Judiciary Committee was something much larger, a direct collision between two completely different visions of what accountability in America is supposed to look like. Representative Jasmine Crockett did not spend her time asking technical questions about departmental procedures. She spent it delivering a broader accusation. Her argument was that the Justice Department has become more focused on protecting political power than pursuing equal justice under the law. Whether viewers agree with that accusation or not, the exchange revealed something increasingly important about modern American politics. Americans no longer simply disagree about policy. They disagree about reality itself. That may sound dramatic. But listen carefully to the competing narratives that emerged during this hearing. Crockett's argument was that federal law enforcement is failing to investigate the people who deserve scrutiny while aggressively pursuing critics, journalists, activists, and political opponents. Bondi and her supporters present the opposite narrative. Their argument is that the Department of Justice is restoring law and order, prioritizing public safety, and focusing on violent offenders who previous administrations allegedly failed to confront aggressively enough. Those are not small disagreements. Those are fundamentally different understandings of what government is doing. And that divide extends far beyond this hearing room. Over the past decade, public trust in federal institutions has steadily declined. Americans increasingly view major institutions through partisan lenses. The FBI, the Department of Justice, the intelligence community, even the courts. A decision that one side views as accountability is often viewed by the other as political weaponization. That institutional trust crisis did not begin with this administration. Republicans spent years arguing that federal agencies were unfairly targeting conservatives. Democrats now increasingly argue that those same institutions are being reshaped to protect political allies while targeting critics. What makes this hearing significant is that both sides are essentially making the same argument. They simply disagree on who is abusing power. That reality represents one of the most important political developments in modern America. Historically, Americans argued over policy outcomes. Today, they increasingly argue over whether the institutions producing those outcomes can be trusted at all. And once trust becomes the central issue, every investigation becomes controversial. Every prosecution becomes political. Every indictment becomes a partisan battle. Every oversight hearing becomes a fight over legitimacy itself. The Epstein discussion highlighted that reality perfectly. For years, the Epstein case has evolved beyond a criminal investigation. It has become a symbol. To many Americans, Epstein represents a broader fear that powerful people operate under different rules than everyone else. That is why public interest remains so intense even years after his death. The case touches on something deeper than any individual defendant. It touches on public confidence. Do Americans believe institutions are willing to follow evidence wherever it leads? Or do they believe certain people remain untouchable? That question has haunted Washington for years. And it remains unresolved. The hearing also exposed another major political reality. Congressional hearings are increasingly becoming media events rather than information-gathering exercises. Lawmakers understand that the most important audience is often not inside the committee room. It is online. It is social media. It is the millions of Americans who will later watch a 60-second clip and decide who won. That changes behavior. Questions become sharper. Answers become more political. And hearings increasingly resemble competing closing arguments rather than fact-finding exercises. What made this exchange notable was not that Crockett and Bondi disagreed. Disagreement is normal. What made it notable was how completely different their descriptions of America appeared to be. One side sees corruption being protected. The other sees criminal behavior finally being confronted. One side sees institutional abuse. The other sees institutional reform. And both sides asking the public to trust their version of events. That may ultimately be the biggest issue raised by this hearing. Because governments can survive political disagreement. They can survive elections. They can survive policy failures. What becomes far more difficult is governing a country where large portions of the public no longer trust the institutions responsible for enforcing the law. That challenge is bigger than any attorney general, bigger than any president, and bigger than any single hearing. Yet it was impossible to watch this exchange without seeing that challenge unfold in real time. But what do you think? Has the Department of Justice become more independent, more political, or has public trust simply collapsed to the point where every major investigation is now viewed through a partisan lens? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you value long-form congressional analysis that goes beyond headlines and examines what these hearings actually reveal about power, oversight, and accountability, subscribe to Capitol Oversight and turn on notifications so you never miss the next breakdown.